Well, here we are. 2022 is wrapping up, and all of the year-end top album lists are coming out. And likewise, I've been reflecting on my favorite albums of the year. So I put together a list of 10 albums that were in heavy rotation for me in 2022. My name's Adam McDormand, and this is Medium Quality. Much like my previous yearly lists, this Top 10 is in no way intended to be a definitive statement on the most important albums of the year. Rather, it is a very organic list of great albums that I enjoyed this year. First up, Animals as Leaders' Parisia. Now, I really love instrumental heavy music, and there's really nothing that sounds quite like Animals as Leaders. And while most of the music that I listened to was more geared toward casual listening, this is absolutely not that. Parisia is full of mind-bending time signatures and head-scratching melodic structures. It's really fascinating stuff. And in spite of how brainy and technical their music is, there's something deeply hypnotic about the rhythmic drone of their music. I started listening to Animals as Leaders way back in 2014 with their album The Joy of Motion, and each new album that they've put out since then has moved that sound forward in really interesting ways. This is probably the most innovative album on my list this year. Next up, Pure Reason Revolution's Above Cirrus. Now, this is a long-time favorite progressive rock group for me, and Above Cirrus is this incredibly dynamic album that stitches together an almost impossible range of rock subgenre sounds. It is heavy alternative rock with big guitar riffs, it's lonely space rock for sad astronauts, it's grungy electronic music that's occasionally danceable even, and in spite of this multitudinous sound contained within the album, the signature elements of Pure Reason Revolutions give this album some consistency, and it's more, in my mind, about mood and texture than really catchy, memorable melodies. That being said, I do think their 2020 album Euphonia had stronger melodies, certainly more memorable ones, but in its strongest moments, Above Cirrus is equally as memorable. Obviously, let me know if you want me to talk more about Pure Reason Revolution, because I enjoy them quite a bit. And I think their music is more interesting when discussed in the context of their entire discography rather than like one album on its own. Next up, Everything Everything's Raw Data Feel. I've been a fan of Everything's strange brand of electric pop since their 2013 album Arc. And I think that this album is perhaps the best application of that unique sound yet. It's kind of youthful, it's energetic, but it's still really moody, full of angular melodies, which I really enjoy. It's kind of like Radiohead after receiving electroshock therapy. Like, you recognize them, but they're somehow irrevocably different. And that's Everything. I think their music is more accessible than you might think, given how weird my description of their music is, but it's dense enough that it rewards repeat listens. Next up is Bartees Strange's Farm to Table. Now, this album might just be the biggest surprise for me this year. I heard about it from a TikTok video, of all places, discussing some underrated black musical artists, and this album is a fusion of a pretty wide range of genre sounds. To my ear, it's an emo album at its core, but it nods at blues and hip-hop and R&B, and somehow Bartees Strange manages to tie all of these disparate sounds together into a cohesive album with a consistent emotional tone of melancholy, and it just fit the vibe for me this year. I really enjoyed it. Next up, Porcupine Tree's Closure Continuation. This is the first new Porcupine Tree album since their 2009 release, The Incident. It was recorded basically in secrecy by 3 of the 4 members of the band, and really the best thing that I can say about this new album is that it sounds pretty much like the next album that they would have made had they stuck together. I do kind of feel the absence of bassist Colin Edwin. He had a really interesting kind of groovy, smooth sound that I think worked really well for Porcupine Tree, and Steven Wilson is playing his own bass lines here, and it's a little bit different. It works, but it's different. On the whole, this is an extremely dynamic progressive rock album, playing mostly with the sounds of hard rock or alternative, very much in the vein of previous Porcupine Tree albums. Next up, the Deer Hunters' Anti-My. Now, the Deer Hunter is one of my favorite bands of all time, and this new album is absolutely excellent. I cannot be objective about it. But this is the first new album that they've put out since they wrapped up their Acts series of albums about 6 years ago. And of course, Casey can't seem to help himself because this new album is kind of a concept piece as well. I would hesitate to call it progressive because it doesn't really sound like what you think a prog rock album would sound like, but it is big and ambitious in the way that a progressive rock album is. It's like this rock-oriented indie music with big cinematic flourishes. And of course, it's got hooks for days. I mean, this album is a very catchy album for me. I love Anti-My. Great album. Next up is Dawes, The Misadventures of Doomscroller. Now, this might be my most listened to album this year. I would kind of describe the sound of it as Steely Dan reincarnated as a band full of sad millennials. It's got some incredibly tasty mid-tempo jams that were constantly stuck in my head. And the lyrical content on offer here really rewards repeat listens. It's kind of commenting on the sorts of topics and concepts that were already living rent-free in my head, so it just made sense. It's probably not an album that's for everyone, but it is exactly the kind of album that I would have made if I had the ability to make an album of some kind. I would have tried to make this one. Yeah, I like it. Next up is Snarky Puppy's Empire Central. This was a very anticipated album for me. It's instrumental music from a big old band of virtuosos that are more interested in chasing a groove than showing off. And honestly, I'd say they caught that groove and didn't let it go for the entirety of this album. This is funky fusion music with orchestral flourishes, and the album was actually recorded in front of a studio audience over the course of several days. So it has the precision of a studio album, but the raw, kind of visceral energy of a live performance. It's absolutely fantastic. Next up, we need to talk about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. At this point, the Giz is putting out so much music that only the most hardcore fans of the group are exploring all of it, and I think that's probably okay. They put out 5 full-length albums this year, 3 of which dropped in October, and I think all of it's worth listening to. The one that stood out to me the most was Laminated Denim. This album is only 2 songs, but they're exactly 15 minutes each. It's this pair of dreamlike, psychedelic grooves that seem to go on forever. And honestly, I think I like the Giz best when they give themselves the space for these long, meandering jams. I think it plays to their strengths, and this is that. Next up, There's 3. Now, this is another album that I wasn't expecting at all this year. This is There's first full-length album, their 3rd release altogether. And as such, I think it is the most complete package that they've put out thus far. It's a big, mathy, punky emo album. And honestly, I don't listen to a ton of new emo anymore, but I'll always come back to hear what Evan Weiss is doing. And if you like Into It Over It, this is very much like that, but with a pinch of punk to it. And also, Jared Carnes joined up to play drums on this album, and he follows me on Instagram. So, and that's all 10. if you want more, here are 6 quick hit honorable mentions. Brother Tiger's Brother Tiger, super chilled out synthwave sound. Ibibio Sound Machine's Electricity, big, funky, electric dance music with a healthy dose of African rhythms. Elephant Jim's Dreams, jazzy Taiwanese math rock instrumentals. Anika Niles' Optunia, which is very drums forward fusion with some big, funky grooves. Julian Lage, View with a Room. It's vibey electric guitar jazz on Blue Note Records. And Surprise Chef's Dedication and Recreation, which is somewhere between lo-fi hip-hop and psychedelic drones. Really great vibes. And that's all of it. So feel free to drop into the comments section below. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong, what did I miss, what's on your list, and we'll find new music to listen to in 2023. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe. Until next time, keep spinning that good stuff. What a time to be alive.